Okay, look, I'm not a bad guy. Truly. I pay my taxes, I rescue spiders from the bathtub, I even separate my recycling most of the time. But there's a sound, a specific nails on a dying chalkboard kind of sound, that can turn a mild-mannered software developer into someone who straps a loudspeaker to a drone to torment his HOA president. It's a Tuesday, 10 a.m. The birds are chirping, the sun is doing its sunny thing, and all I hear is ee-oo, ee-oo. It's been like this for weeks. Weeks. This godforsaken neighborhood siren, a relic from the Cold War, supposedly disabled, has decided to become the soundtrack to my slow descent into madness. It's not a full-blown air raid wail, mind you. That would be too simple, too easy to get fixed. No, this is its death rattle. A high-pitched, intermittent electronic whine that's just loud enough to make you want to claw your own eardrums out with a rusty spork. I work from home, or at least I try to. It's a charming reminder of our town's heritage, Brenda said. Brenda, our HOA president. She said this with a straight face, while simultaneously writing up Mrs. Henderson for having lawn gnomes that were, and I quote, excessively whimsical. That siren, that charming reminder, was about to meet my drone. Brenda was about to meet the real me, the me who'd had enough. It all started, as these things often do, quite innocently, or rather, with my innocent suffering. The siren began its swan song about 3 months back. A few days of it, I figured, okay, a glitch. A week, I started twitching. 2 weeks, my houseplants looked stressed. After a month, I was having actual conversations with the coffee machine, and it was giving me better advice than the official channels. I'd called the city. Not our jurisdiction, sir. That's private property. An HOA issue. Their tone implied I was the first person to ever complain about an HOA. Lucky them. I'd emailed the HOA. Oh, the emails. Dear resident, the first auto-reply chirped, thank you for your inquiry. Your concern is important to us. Standard. The follow-up, a week later, was less encouraging. Dear Mr. Johnson, we are aware of the audible neighborhood feature. Rest assured the matter is being looked into with all due diligence. Sincerely, the HOA Board. Audible neighborhood feature. Like it was a goddamn babbling brook. Diligence, my rapidly fraying sanity. Then I saw her. Brenda. In her natural habitat, my neighbor's lawn, ruler in hand. Mr. Johnson, isn't it? She'd said, not even bothering to look up from Mrs. Henderson's allegedly oversized bluegrass. The siren was doing its thing, a perfect counterpoint to her meticulous measurements. Some residents find the siren a charming reminder of our town's heritage. Besides, it's technically disabled. It's not at full blast. I stared. Disabled? Brenda, it sounds like a banshee with a sinus infection. Constantly, it's making it impossible to work. My clients are starting to ask if I live next to a failing spaceship. She finally straightened, fixing me with that patented HOA president gaze that could curdle concrete. It's a complex issue, Mr. Johnson. There are procedures. And frankly, some of us have real problems to deal with, like unauthorized statuary. She waved a dismissive hand towards a cherubic, yet apparently offensive, birdbath 2 houses down. It's on the list. On the list. Right. Probably filed under things Brenda will get to after the next ice age. The official channels were a masterclass in bureaucratic buck-passing. More emails, more calls, more voicemails that disappeared into the ether. I even braved an HOA meeting. The siren issue got a glorious 30 seconds under new business before Brenda, with a flick of her wrist and a tight smile, announced, as noted in the minutes, the siren is being monitored. We can't just rush into things. Think of the historical implications. Historical implications? The only history it was making was the rapidly escalating number of times I fantasized about launching it into the sun. My blood pressure was probably setting new historical records, too. The tipping point, the moment the last shred of my saintly patience snapped like a dry twig, came on a Saturday. Brenda was in full glorious combat mode, clipboard at the ready, dressing down poor Mr. Henderson over Eugene. Eugene was a small, entirely inoffensive fishing gnome. He sat by Mr. Henderson's rose bushes, pole eternally cast towards a non-existent pond. Eugene, who, as far as I could tell, had brought nothing but quiet, fish-based joy to our little cul-de-sac. The Siren, of course, was providing the dramatic underscore to Brenda's tirade. "It's the scale, Mr. Henderson, the scale! It's entirely out of proportion with the approved landscaping schematic, Section 4, sub-paragraph B." I couldn't help it. Years of repressed annoyance just bubbled up. "Brenda," I said, walking over, my voice dangerously calm. "With all due respect, that gnome is significantly less of a neighborhood nuisance than that Siren you steadfastly refuse to deal with." She whirled around, her eyes narrowing into tiny slits of pure, unadulterated fury. "Mr. Johnson, this is an official HOA matter concerning a clear violation of aesthetic guidelines. That Siren, as I have told you repeatedly, is a community asset. It deters undesirables." "It's deterring my will to live, Brenda," I snapped, louder than I intended. "It's been 3 months. My cat is developing a nervous tic. When are you actually going to do something besides monitor it and terrorize people over garden ornaments?" A smirk. A tiny, infuriating, soul-crushingly condescending smirk spread across her lips. Perhaps if some residents focused less on non-issues like the Siren, and more on, say, the regulation height of their mailbox flag, the community would be a more harmonious place. The Siren is fine. Maybe you're just a little sensitive? Sensitive. That was it. The word, the smirk. Something inside me didn't just snap. It vaporized. Not audibly. Just a quiet little poof in the space where my patience used to live. The kind of poof that precedes either a complete psychotic break or a moment of profoundly dubious genius. I didn't say another word. I just turned, walked back into my house, Brenda's triumphant squawking fading behind me. I stood in my garage, fists clenched, jaw aching. And then my eyes landed on it. My DJI Mavic drone. I'd bought it for landscape photography, a harmless hobby. It had a decent payload capacity. And then I remembered the small, surprisingly powerful loudspeaker attachment I'd bought on a whim a year ago from some obscure website, thinking it would be hilarious for, I don't know, narrating squirrels' lives in the park or something. I'd never actually used it. Until now. "Sensitive, huh?" I muttered to the drone. It sat there, sleek and silent, full of untapped potential. "Fine. Community asset? All right, Brenda. Let's see how you like some proactive community engagement." A slow, deeply unhinged grin spread across my face. It probably would have scared Eugene the gnome. Okay, maybe Sensibly was optimistic for Operation Annoy Brenda, but I had a plan. Or the beginnings of one. Rule number 1, plausible deniability. This was key. Rule number 2, it had to be legal-ish. No actual damage, no direct threats. Rule number 3, and this was the most important, it had to be really, really annoying. Specifically to Brenda. My home office, previously a den of quiet desperation, transformed into a makeshift mission control, drone batteries on charge, laptop open to a sound editing program. I tested the loudspeaker. "Testing, 1, 2, Brenda, your begonias are drooping." The audio was surprisingly clear, even from a distance. Perfect. I curated a selection of unique audio files. Nothing obscene, mind you. I wasn't a monster, just irritating. The kind of sounds that lodge in your brain and refuse to leave. Vuvuzelas. Yes. Badly played bagpipes. The kind that sound like a cat being squeezed. A loop of a goat bleating, slightly off-key. My personal favorite, 10 seconds of a screechy violin practice session, the kind that makes your fillings ache. The first salvo was planned for the following afternoon. Brenda, bless her predictable little heart, was hosting her weekly garden club tea party on her meticulously manicured lawn. The ever-present "ee-oo" of the neighborhood siren would, of course, be part of the ambiance. "Showtime," I muttered to myself, peering through my binoculars from the upstairs window, drone controller steady in my hands. I launched the drone, keeping it high, a mere speck against the blue, positioning it directly over her little soiree. Her and her cronies, sipping Earl Grey and no doubt dissecting Mrs. Periwinkle's choice of petunias. And then a 10-second burst of that screechy violin, silence from below, just the gentle clinking of china. Then a short, sharp blast of goat screams. Chaos. I saw Brenda leap to her feet, tea sloshing from her cup, staining her pristine white tablecloth a rather fetching shade of brown. She was looking around wildly, arms flailing, pointing at the sky with an accusing finger. Her garden club members looked like they'd just seen a garden gnome come to life and demand their crumpets. "What in the Sam Hill was that?" Brenda's shriek was almost as piercing as the violin. "Is it birds? Aggressive, tone-deaf birds attacking my azaleas?" I had to clap a hand over my mouth to stifle a laugh. This was better than I'd ever imagined. It took less than an hour for Brenda to appear on my doorstep, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. It was a good look on her, made her less beige. "Johnson!" she bellowed, before I'd even fully opened the door. "I know it was you! That noise machine, that flying nuisance!" I leaned against the door jamb, affecting an air of mild, scholarly surprise. "Brenda, everything all right? You look a bit frazzled. Must be that siren, it really gets to you, doesn't it?" I tried to inject a note of deep sympathy. I failed, miserably. "Don't you dare play coy with me, you aerial anarchist. The noises from the sky. It was you and your infernal contraption." "A drone?" I said, widening my eyes. "Brenda, are you quite sure? I was on a rather important conference call. International clients, you know. Terribly important. Though I must admit," I added thoughtfully, "that siren was making it awfully hard to hear Mr. Watanabe's quarterly projections." Her sputtering was a thing of beauty. I'll be reporting this. This is harassment. This is an outrage." "Harassment?" I mused. "Brenda, the only ongoing harassment I'm aware of is that 24/7, 5-star siren serenade we're all being subjected to. Have you, by any chance, monitored its decibel levels lately? Or perhaps its effect on local property values?" She stormed off, muttering about bylaws, flagrant disrespect, and the general decline of Western civilization, all apparently caused by me. I allowed myself a small, discreet fist pump, round one to Mike. Of course, she called the cops. That didn't take long at all. The knock on the door was firm. 2 officers stood there. Miller, older, with the weary eyes of a man who'd seen too many inflatable Christmas decoration disputes, and Kowski, younger by the book, probably still believed in the inherent goodness of suburbanites. Brenda was lurking on her porch, a safe distance away, pointing dramatically towards my house like I was harboring a fugitive at T-Rex. "Well, this is a new one," Officer Miller sighed, after I'd invited them in. Brenda tried to follow, but Miller gave her a look that could freeze lava. "Ma'am, why don't you wait on your porch? We'll come get you if we need a dramatic reenactment. I, of course, knew nothing about any aerial noise disturbances. I did, however, have extensive documentation of my ongoing complaints about the neighborhood siren. I'd even made a short recording of its dulcet tones on my phone, which I played for them. Officer Miller rubbed his temples. Yeah, okay, that's something. Definitely something that could make a man creative. He glanced at Kowski, who was looking uncomfortable. Mr. Johnson, we've had a complaint about a drone causing a disturbance, specifically creating sounds described as demonic yodeling. I coughed to cover a laugh. Demonic yodeling? Sounds specific. Can't say I've heard any of that, officer. Though, I agree, something is definitely disturbing the peace around here. I gave a meaningful glance towards the general direction of the incessantly wailing siren. Sir, Officer Kowski said, all earnest procedure, operating a drone in a manner that harasses people is against city ordinances. Even if you say it wasn't you, we're obligated to inform you of that. Officer Miller cut in, his voice low. Look, son, between you, me, and the faulty alarm system down the street that no one ever complains about, that siren is a public nuisance, a certifiable 5-alarm pain in the backside. But so is flying a drone blasting, whatever the hell that was. Just be a good neighbor to everyone. They gave me a general warning about drone usage and disturbing the peace. They also gave Brenda a look that clearly suggested they thought she might be a few sandwiches short of a picnic, but they had to follow procedure. Okay, I thought, as they left. So the demonic yodeling might have been a bit much. Note to self, stick to more ambiguous farm animal noises, or perhaps classical music, played very, very badly. My new plan was simple. If Brenda wouldn't fix the siren, I'd get irrefutable proof it needed fixing. Official proof, hence Dave. Dave, the contractor, came highly recommended from a guy at work as someone who could fix anything, and, more importantly, wasn't afraid of a little paperwork, or HOAs. I met him at the base of the ancient Siren Tower. It was on a small, neglected patch of HOA common ground, inconveniently close to Brenda's prize-winning and apparently very sensitive petunias. The siren was, naturally, wailing its mournful tune. Dave was a character. Mid-50s, wiry, with a tool belt that looked like it had seen active service in several small wars. He was chewing on a toothpick, squinting up at the rusted monstrosity. Dave, thanks for coming, I said. This is the patient. He spat the toothpick out. Yep, she's a screamer, all right. Old Federal Signal model, too. Haven't seen one of these babies actually making noise since they were supposed to be making noise. What's the HOA president say? The one who looks like she gargles with wasps? I grinned. She says it's a community asset, and I'm sensitive. Dave chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. Always the sensitive ones causing the ruckus. So you want me to tell you what's wrong with it? Write it down pretty, maybe with some scary words like imminent failure and catastrophic electrical discharge, so you can wave it in her face like a medieval banner? Essentially, yes, I admitted. And maybe an estimate to, make it... Stop doing that. Permanently. Just as Dave started to unfurl a ladder that looked older than the siren itself, Brenda appeared, as if summoned by the clinking of tools against rusted metal. Her timing was impeccable and infuriating. "What is going on here?" she demanded, marching towards us, clipboard already in hand. "This is common property. You can't just have workmen, unsupervised, tinkering with valuable HOA assets." "Brenda," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "This is Dave. He's a certified electrical technician. I'm paying him, out of my own pocket, to assess the siren, since the HOA seems to be perpetually monitoring it without any discernible result. For safety and sanity. Dave, bless his cynical heart, tipped an imaginary cap. "Ma'am, just here to take a little peek under the hood. Wouldn't want this old girl causing any disharmony in this lovely, tranquil neighborhood." He winked at me. I could have hugged him. Brenda's face went a rather alarming shade of puce. "This is unauthorized. This is vandalism. I'm calling the authorities. Again. They know me there." "I'm sure they do, Brenda," I muttered. This was going to be harder than I thought. But Dave, to his eternal credit, just shrugged, hitched up his tool belt, and started climbing the ladder while Brenda fumed and punched numbers into her phone with furious jabs of her finger. Things were escalating, and I realized I might need backup. Subtly, of course. I started chatting with other neighbors. Turns out I wasn't the only one whose sanity was being eroded by the Siren and Brenda's reign of terror. Maria, a young mom who lived 2 doors down and also worked from home, was a gold mine. She'd been documenting the Siren's wails on her baby monitor for weeks. She had dates, times, even decibel readings from some app on her phone. She threatened to fine me because my wind chimes were too whimsical. Maria whispered over the fence one afternoon, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and righteous indignation. But that infernal Siren, that's just heritage. Then there was Chad. Chad lived across the street, a lanky 16-year-old who seemed to communicate mainly in shrugs and obscure internet memes. But Chad was a budding tech wizard. He'd heard the stories about my disagreements with Brenda. He thought she was a total Karen dude, like textbook. His eyes lit up with an almost manic glee when I, very vaguely, of course, mentioned my drone's audio capabilities. "Dude, you could totally mess with her," he said, his voice alive with enthusiasm in his parents' garage that smelled faintly of old pizza and genius. "Like, I've got this soundboard app. We could make it sound like the ice cream truck, but only she can hear it when she's trying to meditate. Or like really bad opera, right when she's doing her creepy yoga on the patio. I saw her once. It was disturbing." Chad was an evil genius. I liked Chad. With Chad's help, the drone's psychological warfare arsenal got a significant upgrade. We weren't just talking random goat screams anymore. We devised a plan to use highly directional sound, short, confusing bursts, and sounds that were deeply annoying but harder to attribute directly to a drone from a distance. Think dentist's drills during her afternoon nap, the buzz of a single, very persistent mosquito, seemingly right by her ear as she tried to read on her porch. A cuckoo clock, sounding off at odd, irregular intervals, seemingly from nowhere. And yes, Chad, with his surprisingly sophisticated audio software, managed to isolate a few of Brenda's choicest phrases from a, secretly recorded by Maria, HOA meeting tirade. "It's against the bylaws," and "This is unacceptable," which we then distorted just enough to be creepy and played back at her at low volume when she was pottering in her garden. "We're not just fighting a noise complaint anymore," Chad had said, his eyes gleaming. "This is becoming performance art." He wasn't wrong. And Brenda, bless her cotton socks, was our unwilling and increasingly unhinged star. Brenda finally cracked. She called an emergency session to address recent unsavory activities and threats to community harmony. Translation? She was gunning for me, and she was going to do it publicly. The community clubhouse was exactly as depressing as I remembered. Fluorescent lighting that hummed with its own quiet desperation, a lingering smell of stale coffee and defeat, and a plate of even staler cookies that no one ever touched. About 15 residents were there, a delightful mix of disgruntled, apathetic, and nervously curious. Maria gave me a shaky thumbs up from across the room. Chad, lounging near the back with an air of detached amusement, winked. "Settle down, people, settle down," Brenda commanded from the podium, banging a tiny gavel that looked like it belonged in a dollhouse, She looked severe, righteous, and slightly unhinged, which was rapidly becoming her default state. "We have serious matters to discuss." Her presentation was something. She had blurry photos, printed from her ancient inkjet, of suspicious aerial objects that could have been anything from a bird to a weather balloon to a particularly ambitious dust bunny. She had printouts of city ordinances about noise, which was rich coming from her. She delivered a dramatic, finger-wagging monologue about rogue technology, the erosion of neighborhood values, and disrespectful individuals who seemed to think they were above the rules. All eyes, naturally, kept flicking to me. And this blatant disregard for our peaceful coexistence, this aerial terrorism, will not stand, she declared, her voice trembling with theatrical indignation. Certain individuals, another pointed glare in my direction, seem to think they are above the rules, using sophisticated devices to terrorize law-abiding, peace-loving residents. When she finally paused for breath, I stood up, calmly. I had Dave's initial report in my hand, neatly printed. "Brenda," I began, my voice even, "thank you for that spirited performance. While we're on the subject of sophisticated devices terrorizing residents, I have here a professional assessment of the neighborhood Siren." I held up the report. It states, and I quote, "Siren unit severely corroded. Internal wiring compromised, showing signs of rodent damage. Constant, unregulated power draw. Estimated repair, or more likely replacement cost, approximately $4,500. And here's the kicker, Brenda. Recommendation: immediate deactivation to prevent further unpredictable malfunction. Potential electrical fire hazard or, and I'm quoting again, unmitigated auditory assault on the local populace." A satisfying murmur went through the room. "I also have," I continued, pulling out Maria's meticulously kept log, "a detailed record compiled by a concerned neighbor of the Siren's relentless noise pollution over the past 97 days, including decibel readings that frequently exceed acceptable daytime limits for residential areas. So, Brenda, perhaps the real unsavory activity threatening community harmony is the HOA's continued negligence in maintaining its own property and subjecting us all to this community asset." The tide was turning. I could feel it. Old Man Hemlock, who apparently had the entire HOA bylaw document memorized down to the Oxford commas, suddenly piped up. "Article 4, Section B, Paragraph 3, Brenda," he croaked, waving a gnarled finger. "Common area auditory warning devices, if deemed historical, must be maintained in certifiably good working order or be permanently and verifiably deactivated by qualified personnel. It's right there, in the rules you yourself amended in 2017 to include the historical clause after you tried to get rid of the Memorial Day flagpole." Maria, emboldened, nervously shared her decibel readings, her voice shaking but clear. Another neighbor complained the Siren was scaring his prize-winning show poodles. It was beautiful. A glorious, spontaneous symphony of disgruntled homeowners finally finding their voice. Brenda was no longer looking severe. She was starting to look cornered and a little bit green. And then right on cue, as if she'd scripted it for maximum drama, Brenda played what she clearly thought was her trump card. Or maybe she was just panicking. She whipped out her phone, her hand trembling, and shrieked into it. "Yes, officers, it's an emergency, a real one this time. They're staging a coup, a hostile takeover. And Johnson has a weaponized drone and he's threatening us all." Officers Miller and Kowski arrived, looking even more tired, more world-weary, more in need of a long vacation on a remote, siren-free island than the last time. Officer Miller took one look at the scene. The shouting residents, Brenda's wild eyes and disheveled hair, my calm demeanor still holding Dave's damning report. He sighed the deep, resonant sigh of a man who had truly seen the abyss, and the abyss was a suburban HOA meeting. All right, folks, let's all just take a collective deep breath and try to use our indoor voices, Miller said, his voice carrying an edge of profound exhaustion. Brenda, what's the specific, actionable emergency this time? Is it more demonic yodeling, or have the garden gnomes finally risen up? Brenda, beyond coherent thought now, just jabbed a finger at me. He's trying to overthrow the HOA. He's admitted to harassing me. He has evidence. She pointed at Dave's report as if it were a smoking gun. Officer, I said, stepping forward and handing him a copy. I was simply presenting a professional assessment of the dangerously malfunctioning and illegally noisy siren that the HOA, under Brenda's leadership, has ignored for months, despite numerous official complaints. Here's a copy for your records. You'll note the section on fire hazards. Officer Kowski started reading the report, his eyebrows climbing higher with every sentence. Fire hazard? Compromised wiring? Rodent damage? Ma'am, he said, turning to Brenda, who was now attempting to hide behind her gavel. This siren is HOA property, correct? And you're the president? Which means you're responsible for its safe maintenance. And then, the moment I hadn't dared hope for, Dave, my first contractor, who had been quietly observing from the back of the room with the air of a man watching a particularly fascinating nature documentary, stepped forward. Actually, officers, Dave said, his voice calm and carrying easily over Brenda's whimpers. During my initial assessment, I did a little digging, checked the original property plats down at the county records office. Curiosity, you know. He grinned. That siren, while on common ground, has its actual power conduit and main control box located on a tiny sliver of land that's technically part of her. He pointed a thumb directly at a rapidly deflating Brenda, individual property line. She signed off on the original easement years ago, but there was a clause, a lovely little clause stating that if the HOA ever dissolved the common utility maintenance agreement for that specific parcel. Which it did, records show, about 5 years back to save a few bucks on landscaping that tiny strip. Then the full maintenance and liability responsibility for any existing structures on that easement would revert solely to the property owner. He paused for dramatic effect. Even Chad looked impressed. So, officers, Dave concluded with a flourish, she's been the one directly responsible for that screeching heap of rust, or its safe deactivation this whole time. And from the looks of my report, she's been, shall we say, a tad negligent. Boom. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in 3 months. Brenda's face went from red to green to a sort of pale, clammy, wallpaper paste beige. She looked like she was about to be physically ill. The fallout was swift and deeply satisfying. The cops, armed with Dave's report and the property plat information, informed Brenda that she was indeed personally liable for the siren. The city would be issuing her a formal notice of violation for the noise, the potential hazard, and failure to maintain her property, with some rather hefty daily fines if it wasn't rectified, immediately. The HOA board members, smelling blood in the water and freedom from tyranny, were already muttering about a vote of no confidence before the police cruisers had even pulled away. A few days later, a new contractor, Gus Dave, had recommended him, saying, "This one just gets it done, no drama, no poetry, just silence." Arrived with a cherry picker and a set of very large bolt cutters. He expertly, efficiently, and with an almost surgical precision, disconnected the ancient siren. The entire operation took less than an hour. The silence that descended upon our cul-de-sac was glorious. It was profound. Birds chirped, a lawnmower hummed in the distance, normal, peaceful sounds. Gus, wiping his hands on a rag, caught my eye. I was watching from my porch, a massive grin plastered across my face. "Heard you had a bit of a neighborhood concert series going on for a while there," he said, a hint of a smile on his own lips. "Glad I could be the closing act." "You have no idea, Gus," I said, meaning it from the bottom of my heart. No idea. Brenda lost the HOA presidency. Spectacularly. Unanimously, in fact. The Siren was gone, hauled away for scrap. My ears, bless them, finally stopped ringing. Eugene the gnome was back in Mr. Henderson's yard, fishing peacefully, perhaps with a newfound swagger. The world was quiet. Blissfully, wonderfully quiet. I saw Brenda a week later, walking her yappy poodle. She looked smaller, defeated. She saw me watching from my window. For a split second, I thought she was going to say something, maybe even glare. But she just gave a stiff, almost imperceptible nod. Was it acknowledgement? Surrender? And hurried on, dragging the poodle behind her. Progress? Maybe. Or maybe she was just plotting her revenge via strongly worded anonymous letters about the precise shade of my azaleas. Either way, I'd be ready. I found myself in the garage later that day, just looking at my drone. It sat on the shelf, unassuming. Just a drone again. A tool for taking pretty pictures of mountains and sunsets. You know, I didn't set out to be a neighborhood vigilante, a suburban drone warrior. I just wanted some peace and quiet. But sometimes, when the world gives you an implacable HOA Karen and a relentlessly broken neighborhood siren, you just gotta give it back a little bit of creatively applied acoustics, from altitude. And honestly, I wasn't even a little bit sorry. My phone buzzed. A text from Chad. "Dude, check out this new app I found. We can make the drone project tiny annoying holograms now. Think like a ghostly image of Brenda's own face, scowling at her from her prize-winning petunias." I just smiled and shook my head. Maybe later. For now, the silence was absolutely golden.